All right, my friend. Let's sit down and really unpack this. Let's start with a question I think we've all wondered at some point. Why is it that the people who seem to know the most often say the least? There's something almost mystical about the wisdom of silence. It's not about shyness or insecurity. It's deliberate, powerful, and purposeful. Now, let me introduce you to a guy who really understood this. Arthur Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer was a German philosopher, and he had a deep understanding of human nature. Probably too deep for most people's comfort. He didn't just observe life, he dissected it. And one of the truths he landed on was the power of silence. To him, silence wasn't a weakness or a retreat. It was a sign of mastery over yourself and the chaotic world around you. Here's the kicker. We live in a world that celebrates noise. Social media, debates, 24/7 news cycles. It's all about who can shout the loudest or make the biggest splash. Restraint is often seen as indifference or passivity, but Schopenhauer saw it differently. He believed silence and restraint were rooted in wisdom. It's not about staying silent because you're unsure. It's about staying silent because you are sure. Sure of who you are, what matters, and when speaking is actually worth it. So, where are we going with this? Here's the roadmap. We're going to explore Schopenhauer's thoughts on why silence and wisdom are so deeply connected. Look at why, in our noisy and reactive world, restraint is more important than ever. And, most importantly, figure out what we can actually learn and apply from all this. By the end of this, I promise you'll start seeing silence not as emptiness, but as a form of power. A way to rise above the noise, live intentionally, and connect with what truly matters. Let's dive in. All right, let's dig into Schopenhauer's take on silence and why he thought it was such a profound trait of wisdom. Schopenhauer wasn't the kind of guy to sugarcoat anything. He saw life for what it was, full of noise, distractions, and people arguing over things that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. And to him, silence wasn't just the absence of words. It was a deliberate choice, a mark of someone who truly gets it. Schopenhauer believed that silence is the hallmark of depth and intelligence. Why? Because when you truly understand life, the way desires come and go, how arguments often lead nowhere, and how transient most things are, you stop wasting energy on pointless noise. Think about it. How often do people argue just to feel right or validated? Schopenhauer saw through that. He understood that most arguments aren't about uncovering truth. They're about ego. And for him, that was a waste of time and energy. Now, let's talk about two big lessons from his philosophy. The value of inner peace. Schopenhauer believed that wise people prioritize their inner tranquility over external validation. They don't feel the need to prove themselves in every conversation or defend their opinions constantly. Why? Because they know their worth isn't tied to whether someone agrees with them or not. They've found peace within themselves, and they're not going to trade that for the chaos of constant debate. Think about the last time you got into an argument, whether it was online or in person. How did it feel afterward? Draining, right? Schopenhauer would say that's because you were trying to win external validation at the cost of your internal peace. The wise person avoids this trap. They understand that peace isn't something you find in others' opinions. It's something you cultivate within yourself. The economy of words. Here's another gem. Schopenhauer believed that those who truly understand life don't need to say much. It's not that they're shy or don't have opinions. It's that they recognize the limits of language. Words can only go so far in expressing truth. The deeper you understand something, the more you realize how much can't be said at all. This is why you'll often find wise people speaking only when they really need to. They're not out to impress anyone with fancy words or long-winded explanations. They say what's essential and let the rest be understood in silence. It's like that old saying, the wiser the person, the fewer their words. Schopenhauer would have probably loved that one. Contrast with noise. Now let's talk about noise. Something Schopenhauer couldn't stand. He had a sharp critique of shallow conversations, gossip, and the endless pursuit of superficial approval. To him, these were distractions that kept people from real growth and understanding. Type, people who talk just to fill the silence, who gossip to feel included, or who chase approval through empty flattery. Schopenhauer saw all that as noise, unnecessary, meaningless, and ultimately a waste of life. Here's a quote that captures it perfectly. The empty barrel makes the loudest noise. People who don't have much depth are often the loudest in the room. They're trying to compensate for what they lack internally by making a lot of external commotion. On the other hand, those who are truly wise don't need to prove anything. They know that silence can often say more than words ever could. Takeaway: Schopenhauer's philosophy on silence isn't about avoiding communication or withdrawing from life. It's about understanding what's worth your energy and what's not. It's about prioritizing peace over petty arguments, depth over superficiality, and truth over noise. And in a world that's constantly shouting for attention, that kind of silence is a rare and powerful thing. So ask yourself, are your words adding value or are they just filling space? Are you seeking approval from others or are you protecting your inner peace? Schopenhauer would say that the answers to those questions reveal whether you're living wisely or just making noise. All right, my friend, let's really dig into why silence is so much more than just not talking. It's not about biting your tongue or holding back for no reason. It's a form of power, rooted in self-awareness and understanding. Schopenhauer wasn't the only one to see this. Many philosophical traditions emphasize the same thing. So, let's break it down. Why stay silent? First, self-mastery. Silence isn't just about controlling your voice. It's about controlling yourself. It takes discipline to hold back when you want to react, argue, or defend yourself. Think about it. How many times have you said something in the heat of the moment and regretted it later? Wise people know this all too well. They've mastered the art of pausing, of holding back until they're sure their words will add value instead of fuel to the fire. This self-control isn't easy, but it's liberating. When you master your speech, you master your emotions. You stop being a puppet to every impulse or provocation. And that, my friend, is a real superpower in a world where most people are quick to react and slow to think. Second, understanding human nature. Here's a hard truth Schopenhauer understood. People are often driven by emotions, biases, and irrationality. No amount of arguing or explaining will convince someone who doesn't want to listen. The wise know this, so they don't waste their energy trying to win arguments or change minds that are set in stone. Instead, they focus on what they can control, like their own peace of mind. Think of it this way. Silence isn't about giving up. It's about choosing your battles wisely. It's about recognizing that most debates aren't about finding the truth. They're about defending egos. And when you understand this, you realize that sometimes the best response is no response at all. Third, freedom from ego. Ego is a tricky thing. It wants to be right, to be seen, to be validated. But silence is a way of saying, I don't need your validation. I don't need to prove myself. It's an act of transcending ego, of letting go of the need to win or be recognized. When you choose silence, you're not giving up power. You're reclaiming it. You're saying, I'm secure enough in myself that I don't need to engage in every fight or prove my worth with words. That kind of confidence is rare, and it's one of the reasons why silence can feel so intimidating to others. It's the ultimate flex, but in the quietest way possible. The cost of words aren't free. They carry weight. Every time you speak, you spend a bit of your energy, your focus, your emotional reserve. And if you're not careful, that cost can add up quickly. First, misunderstandings. No matter how well you articulate something, there's always a chance people will misunderstand you. Words can be clumsy tools, and even the best intentions can be misread. Wise people minimize this risk by speaking only when they truly need to. Second, escalating conflicts. Have you ever noticed how arguments can spiral out of control? One word leads to another, tempers flare, and suddenly you're in a conflict that never needed to happen. Silence is a way to avoid pouring fuel on the fire. It's a way to diffuse tension before it even starts. Third, draining energy. Talking takes energy, mental, emotional, even physical. And when you spend all your energy on conversations that go nowhere, you're left with less for the things that really matter. Schopenhauer believed that speaking less creates space. Space for reflection, for clarity, for deeper insights. Philosophical parallels. Schopenhauer wasn't the only thinker who valued silence. Let's look at a few others who saw its power. First, Stoicism. The Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, often emphasized restraint. They believed that wisdom comes from mastering your impulses, including the impulse to speak. They'd tell you to ask yourself, is what I'm about to say necessary? Will it help? Or is it just noise? Second, Taoism. Taoist philosophy is all about harmony and balance. One of its core ideas is wu wei, or action through inaction. Sometimes the best way to influence a situation is not by acting or speaking, but by stepping back and letting things unfold naturally. Silence in this sense is an act of trust in yourself, in others, and in the flow of life. Third, Buddhism. Buddhism teaches the value of mindfulness, including or even mindful silence. The Buddha famously said, "If your words do not improve upon the silence, keep silent." It's a reminder that silence isn't empty. It's a space where wisdom can grow. Takeaway. Schopenhauer's philosophy of silence is a reminder that true wisdom isn't about saying more. It's about knowing when to say less. It's about mastering yourself, understanding others, and recognizing the power of restraint. In a world that's always shouting, silence can be the most profound statement of all. So here's my advice. The next time you're about to speak, pause. Ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Will it bring value to the conversation, or am I just filling the air? If the answer isn't clear, consider staying silent, not out of fear, but out of strength. Because, as Schopenhauer would say, silence often speaks louder than words. All right, my friend, let's talk about why silence isn't just a virtue from the past. It's a superpower for today's chaotic, noisy world. In a time when everyone seems to have an opinion and a platform, choosing silence can feel radical, even rebellious. But it's more than that. It's a sign of wisdom, strength, and self-mastery. Let's break it down. Modern relevance, the power of quiet in a noisy world. Have you noticed how loud the world has become? Social media, endless debates, constant news cycles. It's like we're drowning in a sea of opinions and reactions. And here's the thing. When you react to everything, you lose sight of what really matters. Silence in this context becomes a way to cut through the noise. It's a reminder that you don't need to have a take on every issue or respond to every provocation. Choosing silence isn't about apathy. It's about focus. When you stop reacting to every little thing, you free up your energy and attention for the things that truly deserve them. It's about conserving your mental and emotional resources so you can direct them where they'll have the most impact. Think about it. Every time you engage in a pointless argument or scroll through an endless feed of hot takes, you're spending energy that could have gone toward your goals, your growth, or your peace of mind. Silence is a way to reclaim that energy. It's saying, I don't need to be part of this chaos. I've got bigger things to focus on. Examples of wisdom and restraint. History is full of examples of people who understood the power of silence, and their restraint often made them legendary. The Buddha. He wasn't about winning arguments. He was about transcending them. When people tried to provoke him or drag him into debates, he often responded with silence, not out of weakness, but out of understanding. He knew that some arguments weren't worth having, and that true wisdom didn't need to shout to be heard. Albert Einstein. Einstein was known for his thoughtful nature, and part of that was knowing when to speak and when to stay quiet. He once said, "A clever person solves a problem. A wise person avoids it." Silence is a way of avoiding unnecessary problems, especially those that arise from impulsive words. Abraham Lincoln. There's a story that Lincoln would write scathing letters when he was angry but never send them. Instead, he'd set them aside, letting silence do the work instead of his temper. That restraint made him a stronger leader and preserved his relationships and reputation. And it's not just historical figures. Think about leaders or mentors you admire. The ones who really command respect are often the ones who listen more than they speak, who choose their words carefully, and who know when silence is more powerful than noise. The power of silence in negotiation, leadership, and relationships. Let's talk about practical situations where silence becomes a superpower. Negotiation. In any negotiation, silence is your ally. When you stop talking, you force the other person to fill the gap, often revealing more than they intended. A well-placed pause can shift the entire dynamic of a conversation, showing confidence and composure. Leadership. Great leaders know that silence isn't passive, it's strategic. When a leader pauses to listen, they show respect, gain insight, and build trust. It's not about having all the answers, but about creating space for others to contribute. Relationships. In personal relationships, silence can prevent conflicts from escalating. Instead of firing back in anger, taking a moment of silence gives you time to cool down, reflect, and respond thoughtfully. It's a way of choosing connection over ego. Contrast to impulsivity. Now, let's talk about the flip side. Impulsivity. How many times have you seen someone overreact or overshare and immediately regret it? Maybe it's a tweet that backfired, an argument that spiraled, or a comment that hurt a relationship. Impulsivity might feel good in the moment, but it often comes at a cost. When you're reactive, you give away your power. You let external events dictate your internal state. Silence, on the other hand, is an act of reclaiming that power. It's a way of saying, I control my response, not the situation. Oversharing is another trap of our modern world. Social media encourages us to broadcast our thoughts and feelings constantly, but not every thought needs an audience. Silence in this case is about maintaining boundaries, about keeping some things for yourself, where they can grow and develop without outside interference. In a world that rewards noise and instant reactions, silence can feel countercultural, but that's exactly what makes it so powerful. It's a way to rise above the chaos, to focus on what truly matters, and to engage with the world on your terms. It's not about shutting down. It's about choosing when and how to speak, so your words carry more weight. So here's my advice. Don't let the noise of the world drown out your inner wisdom. Practice silence, not as an escape, but as a way to reclaim your energy, your focus, and your peace of mind. And remember, the loudest voices aren't always the wisest. Sometimes the greatest strength is found in the quiet. All right, my friend, let's talk about the practical side of silence. We've already explored how silence is a mark of wisdom and self-mastery, but now let's dig into how it actually transforms your life, your growth, relationships, creativity, and even your connection to something bigger than yourself. Personal growth, clarity through quiet. You ever notice how the best ideas or insights come when you're not trying so hard to find them? That's the magic of silence. It creates space for you to think, feel, and process what's really going on. When life gets noisy, our emotions can get tangled and our thoughts scatter. Silence gives you a chance to step back and say, what's really happening here? Here's the thing. Silence isn't just about the absence of noise. It's about creating a space where your mind can breathe. It's in those quiet moments that you can reflect on your actions, process emotions, and make decisions that actually align with who you are and what you want. For example, imagine you've just had an argument. Instead of reacting right away, you take a moment of silence. Not to stew, but to reflect. In that pause, you can ask yourself, why did that upset me? Was it really about them, or is this something I need to work on within myself? That's where growth happens. Not in the heat of the moment, but in the quiet afterward when you're honest with yourself. Social benefits, the art of listening. Silence isn't just a gift to yourself, it's a gift to others too. Think about it. When was the last time you really felt heard by someone? It's rare, isn't it? That's because genuine listening is hard. Most of us are too busy thinking about what we're going to say next to truly hear the person in front of us. But when you embrace silence, you create space for others to share, to open up, and to feel understood. Here's the truth. People aren't just looking for someone to talk to. They're looking for someone who actually gets them. When you listen more than you speak, you show empathy, build trust, and deepen your relationships. Silence helps you pick up on the subtleties, the tone of voice, the body language, the things left unsaid. It's in these details that true understanding happens. And you know what? Silence can be disarming in the best way. When you're not rushing to fill every gap in the conversation, you create a kind of calm that invites others to be real with you. It's like saying, it's okay, take your time. I'm here to listen. That kind of presence is powerful. Creativity and productivity, the quiet spark. If you've ever felt stuck creatively or overwhelmed with tasks, silence might be the key you've been missing. Noise, whether it's external or internal, can clutter your mind, leaving no room for fresh ideas or clear thinking. But silence? Silence is fertile ground for creativity and problem solving. Some of history's greatest minds understood this. Take Albert Einstein, for example. He often credited his breakthroughs to periods of solitude and deep thought. Or Virginia Woolf, who famously wrote about the need for a room of one's own. A quiet space to think, dream, and create. Silence isn't empty, it's full of potential. When you step away from the noise, turn off the notifications, close the tabs, put the phone down, you create mental space. That's when your brain starts to make connections it couldn't make before, when solutions to problems suddenly become clear, and when ideas you didn't even know you had bubble to the surface. Even in everyday life, silence boosts productivity. Without the constant ping of distractions, you can focus deeply, work smarter, and actually finish what you start. It's amazing how much more you can accomplish when you let silence do its thing. Spiritual dimensions, the depth of silence. Let's go a little deeper, shall we? Silence isn't just about reflection or focus. It's also a way to connect with something greater than yourself. Whether you call it the universe, God, or simply the deeper truths of existence, silence is often the doorway to that connection. Many spiritual traditions understand this. In Buddhism, silence is central to meditation. It's about quieting the mind so you can experience the present moment fully. In Christian mysticism, silence is seen as a way to hear the still small voice within. And in Taoism, it's about aligning with the natural flow of life by stepping away from the chaos and listening to the quiet wisdom of the Tao. Silence isn't about escaping the world. It's about reconnecting with it on a deeper level. When you let go of the noise, both external and internal, you start to notice things you didn't before. The beauty in a single moment, the interconnectedness of all things, the stillness that exists even in the midst of movement. It's in these moments of silence that you can find a profound sense of peace and purpose. So here's my advice. Make space for silence in your life. Not just once in a while, but as a regular practice. Start small. A few minutes a day to sit quietly, to listen, to reflect. Use that time to check in with yourself, to let your thoughts settle, and to reconnect with what really matters. And remember, silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's the presence of clarity, creativity, and connection. It's a tool, a refuge, and a source of strength. So embrace it, my friend. Let it guide you, ground you, and help you grow. Because in a world that never stops talking, silence speaks volumes. All right, let's talk about the tricky side of silence. It's powerful, yes, but it's not without its challenges. Silence can be misread, it can feel isolating, and let's face it, sometimes staying quiet takes more strength than shouting your thoughts into the world. So how do we navigate these challenges without losing the wisdom that silence brings? Misinterpretation when silence speaks the wrong language. Here's the thing about silence. Not everyone understands it. People might see your quietness and think, oh, they're being distant, or worse, they think they're better than everyone else. Silence can easily be mistaken for arrogance or aloofness, even when it's coming from a place of thoughtfulness. The reality is we live in a world that values noise. If you're not speaking up, people often assume you don't have anything to say. That can be frustrating, especially when you know your silence comes from a place of wisdom, not indifference. But here's the balance. Silence doesn't mean never speaking. It means speaking intentionally. There are moments when staying quiet is the wise choice, but there are also moments when your voice is needed. The key is discernment, knowing when your words will add value and when they'll just add to the noise. As Schopenhauer would likely advise, speak when you have something meaningful to say, and let your silence do the talking the rest of the time. Inner struggles, the tug-of-war between silence and speech. Let's be honest, staying silent isn't always easy, especially when your emotions are running high. When someone provokes you, every fiber of your being wants to respond, to defend yourself, to prove them wrong. It takes serious self-control to hold your tongue in those moments. And then there's the question of injustice. When you see something wrong, the instinct is to speak out, and sometimes that's exactly what you should do. But the challenge is knowing when silence is wise and when it's a cop-out. Are you staying quiet because it's the right thing to do or because you're afraid to engage? That's a tough line to walk, but it's one worth reflecting on. The key here is intention. If your silence comes from a place of fear, avoidance, or apathy, it's not serving you. But if it comes from a place of thoughtfulness, strength, and the recognition that speaking would only add fuel to the fire, then you're on the right track. Schopenhauer's perspective, living with misunderstanding. Here's something Schopenhauer understood deeply. Being wise and silent often means being misunderstood. People might question your motives, misinterpret your restraint, or assume you're weak because you're not fighting every battle. And you know what? That's okay. Schopenhauer believed that wisdom often means accepting the limitations of others. Not out of superiority, but out of understanding. He knew that not everyone is ready to hear the truth or appreciate the power of silence, and that's just part of life. The wise don't seek approval or validation. They find peace in knowing they're aligned with their own values. So, here's my advice. Let go of the need to be understood. Not everyone will get why you choose silence, and that's okay. The people who matter, the ones who truly see you, will understand your intent in time. And for those who don't, their opinions don't diminish the value of your wisdom. How to navigate the challenges. Here's the practical takeaway. Silence is a tool, not a rule. Use it with care. Speak when your words will build something meaningful, whether that's understanding, resolution, or connection. Stay silent when words would only create more division, noise, or misunderstanding. And above all, trust yourself. You'll know in your gut when it's time to speak and when it's time to hold back. Remember, silence isn't about winning or losing. It's about staying true to yourself, your values, and the wisdom you're cultivating. Yes, it's challenging, but that's what makes it so powerful. Keep leaning into it, my friend. You're on the right path. All right, my friend. Let's talk about how to actually live the art of silence. This isn't just about keeping your mouth shut. It's about cultivating a sense of purpose and intentionality in how you communicate with the world. Silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the presence of thought. Let's dive in. Self-awareness, recognizing why you speak. First things first, pay attention to your speaking habits. Why do you speak? Are you adding value to the conversation, or are you talking just to avoid an awkward pause? Sometimes we speak to impress others, to feel included, or just because silence feels uncomfortable. But here's the thing. Words have weight, and when you use them sparingly, they carry even more impact. Start noticing those moments when you feel the urge to chime in. Ask yourself, does this really need to be said? Am I contributing something meaningful, or am I just filling space? This isn't about silencing yourself. It's about making sure your words count. When you do speak, people will listen because they know you're thoughtful and intentional. Mindfulness practices, building inner calm. Now, let's talk about how to get comfortable with silence. Not just external silence, but the internal kind too. Meditation is a game changer here. You don't need to sit cross-legged on a mountain. Just spend a few minutes each day sitting quietly, focusing on your breath, and letting your thoughts settle. It's like cleaning out the mental clutter that keeps you from being present. Reflection is another powerful tool. Take time at the end of the day to think about how you communicated. Were there moments when you spoke too quickly or said something you later regretted? Reflection isn't about judgment, it's about learning. The more you reflect, the more mindful you'll become in the moment. Practical steps, putting silence into action. Here are a few simple ways to start practicing the art of silence in your everyday life. Listen actively. Most people listen to respond, not to understand. Flip the script. When someone's talking, really hear them. Don't plan your reply while they're still speaking. Just listen. It's amazing how much more you'll pick up and how much more people will appreciate your presence. Pause before responding. When someone asks you a question or makes a point, take a beat before jumping in. That pause gives you time to think and respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. It also shows that you're considering their words, which builds trust and respect. Spend time in solitude. Get comfortable being alone with your thoughts. Solitude isn't loneliness. It's a space to recharge, reflect, and connect with yourself. Whether it's a walk in nature, journaling, or just sitting quietly with a cup of tea, these moments help you develop a deeper appreciation for silence. Seek meaningful conversations. Prioritize depth over quantity in your interactions. Instead of engaging in gossip or small talk, steer the conversation toward topics that matter. Ask questions that invite others to share their insights and experiences. When conversations have substance, silence feels less like a void and more like a shared moment of reflection, balancing silence and expression. Here's the trickiest part: knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Silence is powerful, but there are times when your voice is needed, when staying quiet would mean missing an opportunity to connect, to contribute, or to stand up for something important. Think of it like this. Silence is your default mode, your baseline. But when you do speak, it's like striking a match in the dark. It carries weight, light, and warmth. Balance is about tuning into the situation and asking, what's needed here? Sometimes it's silence, and sometimes it's your voice. And don't forget, silence isn't about withdrawing or shutting people out. It's about being intentional. When you balance silence with meaningful expression, you create space for others to feel heard while still sharing your truth. Cultivating the art of silence is a lifelong practice. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. Every time you choose to listen more, reflect deeply, and speak thoughtfully, you're strengthening this skill. And the best part? Silence doesn't just transform your communication, it transforms your entire way of being. It brings clarity, depth, and a sense of purpose to everything you do. So start small. Pause, reflect, and let silence guide you. The world might be noisy, but your silence will speak louder than words. All right, my friend, let's wrap this up with something meaningful. Silence, as Schopenhauer taught us, isn't just a void or an absence. It's a presence, a powerful, deliberate choice that holds wisdom and intention. It's about knowing when to engage and when to let things unfold without your input. Let's reflect on this together. Final reflection, the power in silence. Think about this. Silence isn't about shutting down or avoiding people. It's about showing restraint, about knowing when your voice will add something meaningful and when it's better to hold back. Schopenhauer nailed it when he showed us that silence is the mark of someone who's mastered themselves. It's not the absence of thoughts, but the presence of wisdom. When we choose silence, we're choosing reflection over reaction, presence over impulsivity, and depth over noise. It's not easy, especially in a world that's constantly demanding our attention, our opinions, our words. But the moments when we step back and let silence do the work are often the moments that reveal the most about who we are. Practicing intentional silence. Now, here's where I challenge you. Start small. Take a moment to pause before you speak. Ask yourself, does this need to be said? Will this add value, or am I just filling space? It's not about silencing yourself entirely. It's about being intentional with your words. Silence isn't just a gift to yourself. It's a gift to others. When you listen more and speak less, you create space for real connection and understanding. You start to notice things you might have missed before. The subtext in someone's words, the emotions they're not expressing, or even the patterns in your own thoughts. Ask yourself these questions. How often do I speak just to fill the silence? What would happen if I embraced silence instead of fearing it? How would my relationships, my work, and my inner life change if I spoke less and listened more? These are questions worth sitting with, and they're not about judgment. They're about discovery. A closing thought from Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer once said, "A man shows his character just in the way in which he deals with trifles, for then he is off his guard. It's in the little moments, the casual conversations, and the way we navigate silence that our true character is revealed." Silence doesn't just shape how others see us, it shapes how we see ourselves. Silence is a practice, not a destination. It's something you'll get better at over time, and every step you take toward it is a step toward greater self-awareness and authenticity. It's not always easy, and it won't always be comfortable, but the rewards are profound. So take this philosophy with you. Use it to deepen your understanding of yourself and others. Use it to create space for reflection, growth, and connection. And remember, silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the presence of wisdom. Let's both strive for that together. You've got this.